Welcome to the voices of transparency and excellence. We're not pivoting, the world is spinning like a top. Let's stop, figure things out, get some answers. Come with us on this ride. Warm regards, Rick and Judi.
Welcome to our podcast series where we address crucial topics impacting our campus and community. I'm Judi Clarke, and I'm here with...
I'm Rick Gatteau. Good to be with you again, Judi.
Absolutely.
As always. So in today's episode, we will explore how we see ourselves in the context of beauty. Just a fascinating topic. And we're joined by Rebekah Burroway, an associate professor in the Department of Sociology at Stony Brook University. Rebekah, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Great. So just to start, I found your background just so fascinating. Could you share a bit about your bio and what got you interested in this area of research?
Sure, absolutely. When I was a kid, I was always interested in the beauty industry, and I really wanted to be a hairstylist. That was my career goal. And as I got older, somehow, I'm still not exactly sure how, I got a PhD in sociology instead. I think that was mostly due to the influences of some really special professors in undergrad who saw something in me. And so I went to grad school, got a PhD in sociology, and I got tenure doing research on women's empowerment and child malnutrition in low-income countries. And as time went on, after I got tenure, I started thinking about maybe a different research trajectory, and that sort of desire to be in the beauty industry was just still there. All of those years later, it was still there. I was still interested in it. And then a couple of years ago, I had skin cancer on my face, and I had to have a very minor surgery to remove it from my face. And I was really devastated, not by the skin cancer. I wasn't really worried about the health effects. I was worried about what my face would look like, and I was afraid about being pretty with a scar on my face. And that made me really reflective about beauty practices and why I cared so much about my appearance when I should have been caring more about my health and what it would do to my health. But my first concern was what it looked like. And that made me start reflecting about our faces and the way we present to the world and why we're so concerned about the way that we look. And so that's how I started to design a project on beauty. So a year ago, I attended a makeup school, and I became a certified professional makeup artist. And I have spent the last year working in that industry, doing all of the things that makeup artists do. So I go to photo shoots, commercials, fashion shows. I was just backstage at New York Fashion Week 2 weeks ago. Lots of classes and workshops with the major beauty brands, things like that. That's my path. And I will say that it seems like a total 180 from the previous work I was doing on empowerment and child malnutrition. But there is a thread, and the thread is the idea of empowerment. I have always been interested in what empowerment means and how we can get it. And I think that there are ways in which the beauty industry can be really empowering. It's not necessarily, but it can be. So that's the through line that runs through these topics that otherwise seem pretty disparate.
Fascinating. Can you take us back to the origins of beauty? So where did it begin? Where has it led us today in terms of thinking about beauty standards? Talk through the beginning of time and now where we are in terms of beauty at present day.
Yeah, sure. So the very first record that archaeologists have found of cosmetics use dates back to ancient Egypt in about 4000 BCE. So it seems that 6,000 years ago, that people were using kohl to darken around their eyes. They were using rouge to highlight their cheeks. They were using a red ochre to kind of darken their lips a little bit, and using white powders to lighten their skin tone. So, it's really wild to me that 6,000 years ago, Egyptians were doing the same things that we are still doing. We're still lining our eyes. We're still using blush on our cheeks and our lips. We're still using white powders. That is really wild to me.
Now, you know what's really interesting, and I think kind of historically, when you think about beauty products and an appearance of, particularly an empowerment of health. So you think about if you're gaunt, if you're not healthy, have some level of wealth. So when we talk about the empowerment, you can see how there's a real connection and bridging between having makeup and having the persona, the facial persona, as well as clothing, how you express yourself in a way of empowerment. Can you talk a little bit about, from your sociological background and all the theory, but then what you're seeing and demonstrated in people's relationship with makeup? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So you're right that cosmetics use is a marker of wealth, and that is also dates back to the Egyptians. They also saw using makeup in that way, and there's lots of historical records that equate makeup use with wealth. And I would say that, actually kind of tying this to Rick's question about the origins of beauty standards, I think that a big reason that beauty standards were created is to organize people into social hierarchies along with wealth.
Yes.
So that beauty standards become another axis of inequality, just like gender and race and class. And beauty is really intimately tied to all of those things. And so we reward people who conform to the norms, and we penalize people who don't. And it's a way of organizing people into in-groups and out-groups. And there are a lot of rewards that come with beauty or being perceived as conventionally attractive. There's actually lots of research that shows that conventionally attractive people do better in pretty much all aspects of life. They are advantaged. It's called pretty privilege. They have more job opportunities. They have more educational opportunities. They have an advantage in the marriage market. One finding that's particularly disturbing to me is that attractive professors have better class evaluations. So that, I always put on a full face before I go teach, and I'm like paranoid about my class evaluations. And I shouldn't have to think about that, but that's what the research shows. I think that the reason that beauty standards have been created is that it is one more way of organizing people according to a social hierarchy. And you see that play out in all sorts of different areas of life.
Where do you see this play out, too, in areas just of self-esteem and self-confidence, kind of related to beauty and how we perceive ourselves and act in the world?
That's a good question, and that is one of the biggest things that I'm trying to understand with this project that I'm doing. So there are so many ways in which beauty practices are extremely empowering. People will say that putting on makeup makes them feel more confident. I think generally speaking, the reason that people put on makeup is because they want to feel that self-assurance. They want to move with self-possession throughout the world. As they're going about their daily lives, they want to feel good about themselves. And some people might think, no, makeup is for other people. There is a kind of feminist criticism from the 90s that says that makeup is patriarchal because it's all about women wanting to attract men. I don't think that's the case. I think that's outdated. It's not the case. I think women want to feel good about themselves, and they want to feel good in their own skin, regardless of attracting a mate. There is not a ton of research in this area, but there is some scholarly findings that say that all of this is true, that makeup does equate with confidence and feeling good about yourself, that it has to do with authenticity, feeling like you can be your true self. It has to do with self-expression and creativity. And the makeup artists that I talk to in my research and as I work as a makeup artist, they would all echo that. Makeup artists thrive on these ideas of fun and self-expression and creativity and making people feel good about themselves. I love when someone sits in my makeup chair. I love that moment that I finish their look and they look in the mirror and they say, wow, and their face lights up. And I feel like I've done something good in that moment. I feel like I've empowered them because that's the look on their face. But there's a really ugly side to the beauty industry, pun intended. There's a really ugly side, and that is that a sort of proliferation of unrealistic beauty standards, especially through social media and all of the filtering. The proliferation of those kinds of unrealistic beauty standards makes people feel bad about themselves. And that kind of comparing yourself to unrealistic things leads to body dysmorphia, very negative self-image, obsession about your weight, self-objectification, those kinds of things. It's not all empowerment. You know, Dove, the personal care brand that makes soap, they do this global beauty survey, and they did one last year all across the world. And one of the questions that they asked women in lots of different countries was, would you give up 5 years of your life if you could achieve your ideal appearance? And in India, 44% of women said yes. That is not fun, and that is not empowering. And in the US, by the way, it's 21%, which is still pretty horrifying, right? But there's nothing empowering about that. So it really cuts both ways. And what I'm trying to do with my project is understand, given that beauty can be empowering, but it can also be disempowering, I'm trying to understand how we can harness it for the good. So how can we really emphasize those good parts and see the potential for the good that the practices in the industry can do?
Speaking of the industry, there absolutely is an incredible, robust industry around beauty, and people kind of exploiting, as you said, kind of the body dysmorphia and individuals wanting to fit and to look like others that they see as successful, or I don't know, as you know, kind of fitting into the social norms. Can you just talk a little bit and maybe give our listeners a little bit of some of the statistics that you have about the cost of beauty?
Yes, absolutely. There's a huge financial cost, but there's also a big time cost. And the literal cost in terms of dollars is quite shocking, I think. Globally, retail sales of beauty products in 2025 amounts to over $600 billion.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
It's shocking, right?
Right.
But that's not just makeup, it's beauty products in general.
Sure.
So that's also things like skincare, but still. And to put that in perspective, the World Health Organization has done some calculations on what it would take to end acute malnutrition and starvation across the world, to end it completely. And according to those statistics, for the next 5 years, just a very small fraction of that global beauty spending could end starvation and chronic malnutrition. Another example to kind of put things in perspective, I recently bought, I'm not proud of this, by the way. I'm embarrassed, but I'm going to say it. I bought a tube, a very small tube. I don't know why I'm gesturing with my hands. It's a podcast, but a very small tube of wrinkle cream for $125. And that is almost the amount of Burundi's GDP per capita last year.
Wow.
Burundi
Yes.
is one of the poorest countries in the world, and here my wrinkle cream is, their GDP capita for a year. And as a sociologist, I'm ashamed of myself, and I have a hard time admitting that I did that, right? But beauty practices aren't just financial investments. There's a big cost element too. There's a recent article with cross-cultural data. I think they have 93 countries in their sample. It's a survey. And they find that on average, women around the world spend about 4 hours a day on enhancing their physical appearance. Now, that 4 hours includes a lot of things. Again, it's not just makeup, but it's also things like skincare and hair and even going to the gym. But still, it's 4 hours on things to enhance your physical appearance. So that's also the price of beauty. And to put that in perspective, American women spend about 37 minutes a day socializing, 28 minutes a day in educational activities, and only 13 minutes a day helping non-household members. And that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I don't know, just imagine what would happen if we took a fraction of our beauty spending and time and devoted it to other things that could be transformative.
What's your sense of, as you look at the evolution of the beauty industry? You mentioned, obviously, the amount of money the public pays for products. What's the general mindset in terms of how the beauty industry views their mission?
Well, that's a really good question. I see some things changing in the beauty industry in really positive ways, I think, and I'm seeing a lot more inclusivity, and especially when it comes to the way that new brands are popping up and the way that new brands are marketing themselves. I have had the opportunity to hear some of the major players in the beauty industry speak. And in particular, there are two women of color who have founded beauty brands, and I've heard them both speak. And both of them said that the reason that they founded their brands was out of anger. That they looked around them, they were already working in the beauty industry for other companies. And they looked around them and they continually don't see themselves represented in any way. And I'm not just talking about the advertising, but in the products. Because if you know anything about color theory, which I now have learned all about, different products work better for different skin tones and different colors and different textures and there's all sorts of ways in which makeup products, you need different products for different people. And for a long time, the industry didn't recognize that because it was really driven by this sort of white hegemonic ideal of beauty. And that's changing. And that's super exciting to me. And to hear these women speak about their passion to make the industry more inclusive and to see the ways in which they are doing that and the products that they're developing and the innovation and the excitement and the joy when women of all colors can see themselves reflected in the products, that gives me goosebumps. I'm excited just thinking about it.
What I appreciate in a lot of the companies, decision makers, like who's in the boardroom, who are the scientists that are actually making the different shades and so on, have diversified too. So can you talk a little bit about how the industry internally has diversified, which has also brought into levels of awareness of the end user, that, you use a product because it's there. But then if you look at consumer-driven products, then you see that your market rate's even going higher.
Yeah, I think that, so on the one hand, I want to be really excited that this is all driven by a, let's say, passion for inclusivity.
It's profit.
But yeah, exactly. I'm not naive. And again, as a sociologist, I study things like capitalism and inequality and the way that capitalism drives inequality and the way that capitalism drives lots of things. So certainly the beauty industry is no different. I don't know to what extent this is true, but I have a hunch that, of course, that over time, companies started to realize that there was a huge share of the population that they were missing and that they would make more money if they expanded their shade ranges in foundation, for instance. I think that's kind of been the biggest one. I mean, there are lots of products that have been innovated to be more inclusive, but foundation and concealer shades are kind of the biggies. So I think that's certainly a piece of it, and we can't ignore it. But I am optimistic that it's something bigger. And the reason that I'm optimistic that it's something bigger is because I do see when I go to these workshops and makeup classes that are offered by some of the biggest brands in the industry, I do see instructors teaching these classes who are different types of minorities, sexual minorities, racial minorities. The beauty industry is so diverse when you go to events like this. It really does kind of take all kinds, and you will see all kinds of people, all races, all genders, all sexualities, big and small, fat and skinny. I mean, everybody is at these kinds of events. And so I think I am hopeful and I am optimistic that there is something going on here in the industry that is more than just profit.
I want to just ask about beauty more broadly, about both about hair color and also about, I think, this obsession around continuing to look young. So on the one hand, I remember years ago there was this obsession, and maybe I'm thinking of My Devil Wears Prada, where Meryl, had the gray hair, and that became a trend to say, go gray, and there was beauty in that. Yet, when I think about TV commercials, there's so much this obsession around always wanting to look younger than your age. So can you unpack that a little bit about how these trends come about and where we are today?
youthfulness is a beauty standard that has never changed since ancient Egypt. That has never gone away. And as much as I talk about the industry becoming more inclusive, I think that it's not necessarily more age inclusive. Maybe that's changing a little bit. You will see older people occasionally in a makeup ad or in a Sephora ad, but it's absolutely, youth is still prized. One of the highest beauty standards that hasn't changed. And a lot of our makeup practices revolve around making you look younger. So concealer under your eyes is to brighten the eyes and make you look younger. Different kinds of foundation are to try to smooth out fine lines. And by the way, we don't call them wrinkles. We call them fine lines.
Note to self,
Sometimes
fine lines.
they're not fine.
Right. Yeah. Because what I've learned is that it really matters the language that you use surrounding makeup, and especially when you are doing makeup on someone's face, you have to be very careful about the words that you use. It doesn't feel good to be told that you have wrinkles or that you have, the language really matters. But anyway, so a lot of the makeup practices are with the intention of looking younger. Contouring is all about lifting the face. Blush placement, also all about lifting the face. There are millions of beauty tutorials that are how to lift your face without getting a facelift. And then don't get me started on that whole industry of, cosmetic surgery. But that is one beauty standard that hasn't changed in thousands and thousands of years.
It's really interesting when we talk about makeup and culture and kind of lifting as you age your face, you lose the elasticity and the fat in your face and your face sags. But what I found that's really interesting, particularly around the culture, is I've seen a lot of new makeup techniques and trends that are falling on cultural lines. And so people like speaking of, like the Cleopatra eyes with the long tail because it goes into the crease of the eye. And so can you talk a little bit about how some of those culturally inspired trends kind of rotate back into kind of modern looks?
Yes. So let me think. Trends come and go. That's obvious. And I think, though, that a lot of the trends have to do with what is going on in that particular culture at that particular time. So it's about the historical context, and it's also about the cultural context in that moment. For a long time in historical times, like biblical times, for instance, makeup was associated with sex work, that only sex workers would paint their faces. And over time, obviously, that became acceptable and not associated with sex work, and everybody was wearing makeup. But I think that the trends are derived from what is happening in that particular cultural moment and time. So another historical example is in the Victorian era. There was a real push for conformity and modesty, and so Queen Victoria said that makeup was vulgar and impolite, and so people stopped wearing it. And that was a result of that particular historical moment where the mood was modesty. And by the way, people didn't actually stop wearing makeup. They just did it subtly and went for a no makeup look, which, by the way, is back trending again.
That was
It's back trending again. So another example of the way in which we have to look to the time and place, the cultural context and the historical context of what's happening in order to make sense of beauty trends. In the 1920s, this is one of my favorites. In the 1920s, women started to paint their knees. And it started with just a little bit of rouge on the knees, and then it evolved into more complicated designs, and they were using paint to paint flowers and even pictures on their knees. And this was in conjunction with, rolled down stockings and rising hemlines for probably the first time in history. And what was going on in that cultural context? Well, this is a pushback against the Victorian era. it's a pushback against the modesty of that era. But also, if you think about what was happening in the 20s, women were getting the right to vote and women were entering the labor force in large numbers. And so that beauty trend on the knees was sort of reflective of this newfound freedom overall and this rejection of the kind of oppression of women and this real moment of empowerment at that particular time in history.
Fascinating. But of a new trend that I think is really interesting is like kind of this aesthetically looking tired, which seems to be opposite of why we wear makeup, is to actually kind of hide that. But this is a new trend. Tell us about it.
So you're right that historically looking tired is associated with aging and poor health and unattractiveness. So we usually fight against this with concealers and color correctors, under eye creams to achieve a brightness under the eyes. But in July, tired girl makeup became a category on TikTok. And tired girl makeup is an undone, messy look with dark shadows around the eyes, smudged eyeliner, maybe a little red or purple under the eyes, very pale skin, and slightly purplish lips and cheeks. So, yes, why?
Why? We're curious. Why?
Yes. Why?
I think that this is a celebration of realness. I think that it's a pushback against the unrealistic beauty standards. For a long time, there's been this clean girl aesthetic, which emphasizes really perfect skin. And I can tell you, having been in lots of faces, perfect skin is not, nobody's skin is perfect. It just doesn't exist. But celebrities like Hailey Bieber have made this sort of unachievable look really popular. And so I think the tired girl aesthetic is people are tired, pun intended, of this overly curated perfectionism. And so they're fighting against that and trying to achieve a more real and lived-in look, making a statement that I have more important things to do, and putting on my face isn't one of them.
It's kind of social messaging.
Yes, but the irony, I have to laugh about it because I think, by the time you get to my age, you don't have to try to look tired. You just look tired.
Exactly.
And also, a lot of these trends are really popular with like 18-year-olds.
Right.
And they couldn't look tired if they tried. So they do try. And that's the irony of this trend, is that there's a TikTok tutorial that showcases a 12-step routine to get that tired girl look.
12 steps.
And that sort of defeats the purpose, if you ask me, right?
Just pull it all-nighter and you got it covered that way.
Oh, my gosh. Just wash my face and I can give you one step. Interesting.
Can you tell us a little about trends you're seeing with men in terms of the beauty industry?
First, I will just say that the same beauty standards that typically apply to women apply to men. Youth, facial symmetry, and a fit physicality. And for men, it's muscular. That sort of doesn't matter, women or men, that kind of a beauty standard is still the ideal. I would say that in terms of makeup use, I actually read an article in Forbes recently that claimed that the market in men's makeup is going to be growing very quickly. In the United States, I don't see that yet, unless you're talking about queer men, then that's a different story. But heterosexual men, I don't see that yet. I do, when I'm doing fashion shows, if I have a male model, we do just very, very, very little bit of, we don't call it makeup, we call it men's grooming, because again, language matters. So I'm not putting foundation on you, I am grooming you.
On my fine lines.
Exactly. But here's another way in which culture really matters, because it's a different story in South Korea. South Korea is the skincare and makeup capital of the world. It's also the cosmetic surgery capital of the world. Men are wearing makeup increasingly more, and that's also related to this K-pop culture. A lot of the male stars wear makeup, and so that normalizes it. And so more men are wearing makeup in Korea. And that's not to say that a majority of Korean men, but certainly more than the United States.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you also for your transparency, as you shared earlier. That's really important, because I think sometimes when we talk about it from others' perspective, when in actuality, we're also representing our own truth. So we hope our listeners have found these discussions informative and empowering as we navigate these times together. Thank you again to our guests. We're so happy for the insight that you shared with our audience, and for your valuable contributions. Thank you so much.
So is it time to go get a mani and pedi?
It is. And work on our fine lines.
Men's grooming for you.
I'm ready to come back next week. So we hope you'll join us next week when we explore data intelligence and profiling. But for now, I'm Rick Gatteau.
And I'm Judi Brown Clarke. Thank you for tuning in.